A billionaire sees a woman selling flowers in the freezing rain outside his office building, and when she turns around, he recognizes her immediately. What he did next left everyone who knew him completely speechless. Before we start, comment below which city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Harrison Cole had not built a real estate empire worth $400 million by being sentimental. He had done it by being precise, by cutting what needed to be cut, by walking past things that would slow him down. That was how he lived his life, efficiently, cleanly, without looking back. So when he stepped out of his downtown Toronto office tower that Thursday evening in early December and saw the woman crouched on the sidewalk beside a bucket of white chrysanthemums, her thin jacket soaked through from the rain, he almost kept walking. Almost. He stopped because of her hands. She was wrapping a small bundle of flowers with steady, careful fingers, and there was something about the way she did it. Deliberately, as though the task mattered deeply, that snagged something in him. Then she looked up, blinking rain off her lashes, and Harrison felt the ground tilt slightly beneath him. He knew that face. He had not seen it in 11 years, but he knew it the same way he knew his own reflection, instantly and without question. "Simone," he said. Simone Aubert did not flinch. She had not become the kind of woman who flinched. She looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes steady, and then she said, "Hello, Harrison," in the same calm voice she might use to greet a stranger who had asked her for directions. She did not ask how he was. She did not smile. She turned back to her flowers. He stood there in the rain for a moment that felt much longer than it was, his umbrella held uselessly to one side. Simone Aubert. Simone, who had been the sharpest person in every room she entered at McGill. Simone, who had argued with professors and won, who had written her thesis on urban housing policy at 22 and been offered a position at a think tank before she graduated. Simone, who had once told him, clearly and without cruelty, that she would not be with someone who mistook wealth for worth. He had never entirely forgiven her for being right. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked. "About 8 months," she said. She did not look up. "Is there something you wanted to buy, or are you just standing in the rain for the atmosphere?" He bought every flower in the bucket. She looked at him then. Her expression was difficult to read, somewhere between exhausted and amused. He handed her a $100 bill and told her to keep the change, and he watched something flicker across her face that was not gratitude. It looked more like the kind of pride that costs something to hold on to. "I don't need charity, Harrison. I'm buying flowers. I have a lobby." He picked up the bucket himself. "Go home. You're soaked." He went inside before she could answer, which was perhaps cowardly, but which also meant she could not give the money back. That night, Harrison sat in his penthouse on King Street West, with the chrysanthemums arranged badly in a pitcher he'd found at the back of a cupboard, and he thought about what he'd seen on her face. Not just the cold. Not just the rain. There had been something else, a tension around her eyes, a quality of tiredness that went deeper than one hard evening. He had resources, he had connections, and against every instinct he had cultivated over 20 years of deliberate, unsentimental living. He pulled out his phone and asked his assistant to find out what she could about Simone Aubert. What he learned the next morning changed everything. Simone had been a senior policy analyst at a nonprofit housing organization called Threshold. She had been good at it, genuinely good, the kind of good that changes how a city thinks about its most vulnerable residents. 18 months ago, the organization's executive director, a man named Philip Dunmore, had begun embezzling from the operating fund. When Simone discovered the discrepancy and brought it to the board, Dunmore had gotten there first. He told them she was the one who had manipulated the accounts. He had manufactured documentation. Not well, but well enough to create doubt, and doubt was sufficient. Threshold had let her go. A formal investigation had been opened, and then quietly closed when Dunmore produced enough paperwork to muddy the water beyond usefulness. Simone had not been charged with anything, but her name had been attached to the accusation, and in the nonprofit world, that was enough. No one would hire her. Her savings had lasted 9 months, and so she sold flowers on Queen Street in Wellington, and, sometimes, outside Harrison's building on Bay Street. Harrison read the summary his assistant had prepared twice. Then he called his legal team. He did not tell Simone what he was doing. He was not entirely sure why. Partly because he suspected she would try to stop him. Partly because he wanted to understand what he was feeling before he had to explain it to her. He found her again on Friday, at the corner of King and York. She was wearing the same jacket, but had added a knitted scarf in a rust-colored wool that looked handmade. She did not seem surprised to see him. "Did you enjoy the flowers?" she asked. "They're holding up," he said. "Can I buy you a coffee?" She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at the sky, which was a uniform gray and gave nothing away. "All right," she said, "but I need to be back in an hour." They went to a Portuguese bakery on Adelaide that had been there since before either of them was born. It smelled like warm bread and espresso and something sweet. Simone wrapped both hands around her cup and let the warmth do its work. And Harrison watched her do it and thought about how you could know a person at 22 and have no idea what they were made of until you saw them at 33, sitting in the cold light of December, still completely themselves. "You don't have to pretend this is accidental," she said without looking up. "You looked me up. I know you looked me up." "I did," he said. She nodded. "And now you want to help." "Yes, and I should say no. You should say whatever you actually think," he said. "That's what you used to do." She looked at him then, a long, appraising look. "What do you know about what happened at Threshold?" "Enough," he said. "Dunmore manipulated the records and threw you under the bus. You told the truth and lost anyway. That's not a new story, Simone. But I have lawyers who are very good at finding the things in old stories that were missed the first time." Silence. Outside, a streetcar groaned past on its track. "Why?" she said. It was the same question she had always known to ask. He had not prepared an answer. "Because what happened to you was wrong," he said, "and because I can do something about it." She looked at her coffee. "That's not the whole answer." "No," he said, "it's not. But it's the part that matters right now." She left without giving him an answer. He paid for the coffee and walked back to his office and did not hear from her for 4 days. On the 5th day, she called. "If your lawyers find something," she said, "I want to be part of it. I'm not a spectator in my own life." "I know," he said. "I'll send you everything they have so far." There was a pause. "Harrison, if this is pity, it's not." Another pause, shorter. "Okay," she said. It was not the beginning of something easy. Simone was not easy. She pushed back on the lawyer's strategy twice and turned out to be right both times. She identified a discrepancy in Dunmore's manufactured documentation that the legal team had missed, a timestamp inconsistency that, when traced back through the server logs, was damning. She worked from a laptop at the kitchen table of the apartment she shared with a friend, and she sent Harrison annotated documents at 11 o'clock at night with questions that required actual answers. He found himself looking forward to the emails. He told himself this was because the case was interesting, which was true. He told himself it was because Simone was thorough, which was also true. He did not tell himself the other thing, because he had learned a long time ago not to let himself want things that required someone else to want them back. Meanwhile, he had suggested, carefully, because he knew how she'd take it, that she interview for a temporary research position at one of his foundation's partner organizations. It was legitimate work, properly paid. She had stared at him for a long moment. "Is it a real job, or are you creating it for me?" "It's a real job. They've been trying to fill it for 3 months. I'll send them my CV," she said. "Not because you suggested it, because I want it." "I know," he said. She got the job. He did not tell her he had put in a call to the executive director. Some things a person did not need to know in order for them to be true. Let's pause here for a moment. For those of you who have been reading the comments, go ahead and type the word January in the comments section. Only the real ones make it this far. Now, back to the story. The weeks that followed had a rhythm to them that Harrison had not experienced in years. Simone worked her new job and continued helping the legal team in the evenings. She was focused and relentless and occasionally wrong in interesting ways, which meant that arguing with her was productive rather than simply exhausting. They met for coffee twice a week. Then 3 times. It was not romantic, or rather, it was not named as romantic, which he understood was not the same thing. One evening he was reviewing documents at his office when his phone buzzed. It was a message from a number he didn't recognize, with a photo attached. In the photo, Harrison was standing outside a restaurant with a woman named Diane Kessler, a property developer he'd been in a long, complicated professional negotiation with. The message said, "Does she know who she's dealing with?" He stared at the message for a moment. Then he called the private investigator who handled security matters for his company and told him to trace it. He suspected, Correctly, as it turned out, that it came from someone in Dunmore's orbit. The man was feeling the pressure of the investigation closing in and had decided to try a different kind of disruption. Harrison forwarded the message to Simone with a single line. "Someone's trying to rattle us. Diane Kessler is a real estate contact. I'll send you the contract if you want to confirm." He paused and then added, "I thought you should see it rather than wonder." She replied 20 minutes later, "Thank you for telling me." And then, after a moment, "I wasn't going to assume the worst. But I appreciate that you told me anyway." He read that message 3 times. He did not examine why too closely, but he was aware that something had shifted. A weight that had been held carefully in place for a long time had moved, just slightly, toward something he didn't have a name for yet. The investigation concluded in February. Dunmore's manipulation of the financial records was definitively established. He resigned from his subsequent position, which was quiet enough not to make the news, and then the College of Non-Profit Administrators notified him that his credentials were under review, which was not quiet at all. Threshold's board issued a formal statement clearing Simone's name. She called Harrison when she heard. He was in a meeting, and he stepped out of it without explanation, which was not something he did. "It's official," she said. Her voice was steady, but he could hear something underneath it. "How do you feel?" he asked. A long pause. "Like I've been holding a door shut for 18 months and someone just told me I can let go." He didn't say anything for a moment. "Are you home?" "Yes. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. He was there in 17. She opened the door and looked at him, and then she laughed, a short surprised sound, and said, "You actually came." "I said I would." "People say a lot of things," she said. "I know," he met her eyes. "I'm not people." She stepped back to let him in. The apartment was small and warm and smelled like tea. There was a coat thrown over a chair and a stack of books on the floor beside the couch, and a ceramic mug with a chip in the handle sitting on the kitchen counter. It looked like a place where someone actually lived, and he was aware, standing in it, that his own apartment did not look like that. They sat at the kitchen table and she made tea, strong, black, poured into mismatched mugs, and they talked. Not about the case, not about next steps or strategy or what she would do now that her name was clear. They talked about the city, about a book she'd read, about the neighborhood where they'd both grown up without knowing each other, and somehow ended up at the same university in the same program, and still managed to spend most of their time arguing. "You were very annoying," she said. "You were insufferably right about everything," he said, "and you've never completely forgiven me for it." "I'm working on it," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she smiled. A real smile, not the careful, measuring kind she'd been giving him since December. It changed her whole face. He thought about how he had walked past her on that sidewalk in the rain and almost kept going. And he felt something that took him a moment to identify because he had spent so long not feeling it. It was gratitude, not for what he had done, but for the fact that he had stopped. The weeks after the investigation closed were different. Not entirely uncomplicated. Nothing with Simone ever was, but different in a way that mattered. She joined a policy roundtable at the City of Toronto and was asked to present to the Housing Committee within 6 weeks. She called Harrison afterward, her voice carrying something between disbelief and satisfaction. "They actually listened," she said, "not just nodded and moved on. They asked follow-up questions." "That's because you're good at what you do," he said. "I know," she said simply, and he liked that she did not deflect it. They had dinner one Thursday at a restaurant on Ossington. Not a business dinner, not framed as anything particular, just dinner. She wore a green dress and her hair loose, and she argued with him for 40 minutes about the proposed policy framework for affordable rental housing. And he argued back, and when the waiter came to ask if they wanted dessert, they both said yes at the same time without looking away from each other. He walked her home after. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that February in Toronto can sometimes produce if it's not too cold. Still, and slightly luminous with reflected light off the snow. At her door she turned and looked at him. "Harrison," she said. "I know," he said. She waited. "I'm not good at this," he said. "I'm very good at a lot of things, but I'm not good at this. I want to say the right thing and I don't always know what that is." She tilted her head slightly. "What do you actually want to say?" He thought about it honestly. "That I'm glad I didn't walk past you," he said. "That I would like to not walk past you for a long time." Silence. A streetcar went by on Dundas 2 blocks over, its bell distant and faint. "That's a very Harrison Cole way to tell someone you care about them," she said. "Is it terrible?" "No," she said. "It's actually kind of perfect." She paused. "I'm not easy. I know. I'm going to disagree with you constantly. I'm aware, and I'm not going to pretend I don't notice when you're doing something without telling me." He met her eyes. "I know," he said again. "I'm still learning that part." She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "Then let's try." Spring came the way it always does in Toronto, reluctantly, in fits, with cold snapping back just when everyone thought it was safe to stop wearing wool. But by May the trees along the annex streets were in bloom, and Simone had a proper office at the City of Toronto, and Harrison had started leaving work at a reasonable hour more days than not. He did not propose dramatically. He would not have known how, and she would not have wanted him to. They were sitting in the backyard of the small house she had rented in Roncesvalles. She had a backyard now, with one sad tomato plant she was committed to rehabilitating, when he took her hand and said, "I want to do this for the rest of my life, if you want to." She looked at the tomato plant for a moment. Then she looked at him. "Do you mean the plant or the relationship?" "Both," he said. "The plant needs us." She laughed. It was her real laugh, the one that arrived all at once. "Yes," she said. "Yes to both." The wedding was small, 50 people in a restored heritage hall in the Distillery District, in October, with the trees outside the tall windows gold and orange and letting go. Simone wore ivory, no veil, her hair in a low knot that came undone by the end of the night, which she said was a metaphor for something, and Harrison said was just a bad pin job, and they argued about it quietly during their first dance, while everyone watched and smiled. That winter, Harrison's assistant asked him, professionally, carefully, why he seemed different lately, less pressured. He thought about how to answer. "I stopped walking past things," he said. She nodded as if this made sense, though he suspected it did not, and he let it go. In March, Simone found out she was pregnant. He was reading contracts at the kitchen table, their kitchen table now, in a house in Roncesvalles, with a backyard and a radiator that made sounds, when she put a small paper bag from the pharmacy in front of him and sat down and looked at him. He looked at the bag, then at her. Her face was very still in the way it got when she was working something out. "How do you feel?" he asked. He had found that this was often the right question. "Scared," she said, "and a lot of other things, but mostly scared." "Okay," he said. He reached across and took her hand. "Me too." She looked at him. "You're scared?" "I have no idea what I'm doing," he said. "I've never claimed otherwise." Something in her face eased slightly. "That might be the most honest thing you've ever said to me." "I doubt that," he said. "I said the tomato plant needed us." She squeezed his hand. "We're going to be okay." "Yes," he said. And he meant it in the way that counted, not as certainty, but as intention, as something they were going to make true together. The months that followed had a different rhythm, slower in some ways, faster in others. Simone worked until 6 weeks before her due date, which her doctor called ambitious and she called reasonable, and which Harrison called nothing because he had learned which things to leave alone. He painted the second bedroom the color she chose, which was a pale green called Restoration, and he assembled the crib twice because he had done it wrong the first time, and she had not said anything about this, which was its own kind of generosity. On a Tuesday in November, early in the morning, with rain against the windows and the radiator making its noise, their daughter arrived. She was small and furious, and had Simone's eyes and Harrison's unfortunate tendency to express displeasure loudly. They named her June, after no particular reason except that it felt like the right kind of name, warm and full of something coming. Harrison held her in the hospital room while Simone slept, and he looked at June's small red face and felt the same thing he had felt on that sidewalk in December 11 months ago. The vertiginous awareness of how close he had come to walking past something that mattered. He had not walked past it. He would not walk past it now. What once had been a life arranged to move efficiently through the world had become something else, messier, louder, full of disagreements that resolved into something better than agreement and dinners that ran long and a backyard garden that was, against all reasonable expectation, beginning to actually produce tomatoes. It was not what he had planned. It was entirely what he needed. What did you think of Harrison and Simone's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments below and rate this story from 0 to 10. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss another story. And if you'd like to hear more, click on the screen now.